The acrid smell of burnt rubber and gasoline clung to the damp Marin County air. Joel Davis stood on the slick asphalt, the flashing red and blue lights of the emergency vehicles washing over his ashen face. His mistress, Avery, clutched his arm, her knuckles white. Below them, in the ravine, lay the mangled, blackened husk of a Porsche Macan, the very one he'd gifted his pregnant wife, Jeanne, last Christmas. A firefighter's solemn words echoed in his ears. "Single occupant. I'm so sorry, Mr. Davis." A strange, chilling cocktail of grief and relief flooded Joel's veins. It was over. The suffocating marriage, the secrets. It was all over. The call had come at 2:17 a.m., a shrill interruption to the sterile silence of Avery Reed's minimalist apartment in Pacific Heights. Joel had been awake, staring at the ceiling, the ghost of his last argument with Jeanne playing on a loop in his mind. "You're a shell of a man, Joel," she'd said, her voice quiet but laced with steel. "You hide inside this fortress of money and expect it to love you back." He'd snatched the phone, his heart hammering against his ribs. It was the California Highway Patrol, an accident on Panoramic Highway, a vehicle registered in his name. Now, standing at the precipice of the ravine, the reality of it was a physical blow. The Porsche was barely recognizable. Flames had licked the paint clean off, leaving a skeletal frame that glowed orange in the pre-dawn gloom. Avery shivered beside him, her perfectly sculpted face a mask of concern. "Oh, Joel. My God." "Jean," he pulled her closer, playing the part of the devastated husband. It wasn't entirely an act. A part of him, the part that remembered the woman he'd fallen in love with 10 years ago, was screaming. But another, more dominant part, the part that had spent the last year entangled with Avery, planning a new life, felt a sickening, liberating calm. He was free. The universe had just handed him a brutal but clean exit. A stocky, world-weary detective with a salt-and-pepper mustache introduced himself as Detective Harding. His eyes, small and sharp, seemed to miss nothing. "Mr. Davis, we need to ask you a few questions. When was the last time you saw your wife?" "This afternoon," Joel lied, his voice cracking with practiced grief. The truth was he hadn't seen her in 2 days, not since their fight. They had been living in separate wings of their sprawling Sausalito mansion, communicating through cold, terse text messages. She said she was going for a drive, to clear her head. We had a disagreement." He let his voice trail off, inviting the detective to fill in the blanks of a typical marital spat. Harding nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on Avery. "And you are?" "Avery Reed. A family friend," she supplied, her voice smooth as silk. "I was with Joel when he got the call. I came to support him." The detective's eyes flickered between them, an unreadable expression on his face. "Right. A family friend." He made a note in his small pad. "We found a purse. The ID says Jean Wilson. We'll need a formal identification later, of course. But for now, we're proceeding under the assumption that the victim is your wife." Each word was a nail in a coffin Joel had long been building. He and Avery were driven back to his mansion, the one Jeanne had filled with art and light and warmth. As they stepped into the grand foyer, the silence was deafening. Her scent, a faint trace of lavender and citrus, seemed to hang in the air, a ghostly accusation. "I'll make you some tea," Avery said, her voice a soft murmur as she disappeared toward the kitchen. Left alone, Joel's eyes fell upon a framed photo on the console table. It was from their trip to Italy, 2 years ago, before the rot had set in. Jeanne was laughing, her head thrown back, the Tuscan sun catching the gold in her hair. She looked radiant, alive, full of a hope he had systematically extinguished. A wave of genuine, gut-wrenching guilt washed over him. He had been planning to ask her for a divorce next week, after his company's merger was finalized. He'd rehearsed the speech, a cold, corporate-style severing of ties. He'd imagined her tears, her anger. He had not, in his wildest nightmares, imagined this violent, fiery end. He sank onto the bottom step of the grand staircase, his head in his hands, the performance over. He was alone with the chilling reality of what he had wished for, and the horrific way it had been granted. The days that followed were a masterclass in public grieving. Joel issued a statement, crafted by his PR team, about the loss of his beloved wife and unborn child. He received condolences from business partners and society acquaintances, each call a fresh twist of the knife. In the vast, echoing silence of the Sausalito mansion, he and Avery existed in a strange limbo, their illicit affair now shrouded by a tragedy that was both real and a convenience. The power imbalance that had defined their relationship was now starkly illuminated. Avery, a talented but struggling art curator, had been entirely dependent on Joel's patronage. He funded her gallery, paid for her apartment, and curated her social circle. In return, she had offered him adoration, a youthful antidote to what he saw as Jean's increasingly critical gaze. Now she walked through Jean's house, as if measuring it for new curtains. "Maybe we should pack up some of her things," Avery suggested one evening, her voice gentle but firm. They were in the living room, a space Jean had designed with warm woods and plush, cream-colored furniture. "It must be so painful for you to see them everywhere." "No," Joel said, his tone sharper than he intended. "Not yet." He felt a primal need to preserve the space, as if changing anything would be a final, unforgivable desecration. He was haunted by Jean. He saw her ghost in the garden, tending to her roses. He heard the echo of her laugh in the hallways. The guilt was a physical presence, a weight on his chest that made it difficult to breathe. Avery's attempts at comfort felt cloying, invasive. She tried to cook for him, but her food tasted bland after years of Jean's vibrant, flavorful meals. She tried to initiate intimacy, but her touch felt foreign, a trespass against his grief and a reminder of his betrayal. Their secret, once a thrilling escape, was now a shared prison cell. One afternoon, while searching for a stock certificate in the shared home office, Joel found a small cedar box tucked away on a high shelf in Jean's closet. Inside, nestled on a bed of tissue paper, were a pair of hand-knitted baby booties, a soft, buttery yellow. Beneath them was a leather-bound journal. His heart seized. He opened it, his hands trembling. Jean's elegant script filled the pages. He read the first entry, dated 6 months prior, October 12th. "I saw them today, at that little Italian place on Chestnut Street. He was looking at her the way he used to look at me. My heart didn't break. It just stopped. For a full minute, I think I forgot how to breathe. The baby kicked, as if to remind me I wasn't alone." He slammed the journal shut, his breath catching in his throat. She knew. For 6 months, she had known. The entire dynamic of their last few months together shifted in his mind. Her silences hadn't been passive, they had been observant. Her sadness hadn't been weakness. It had been a quiet, profound mourning for a marriage that was already dead. That night, the first major fissure in his new reality appeared. "My lease is up next month," Avery said, swirling the wine in her glass. "It doesn't make sense to renew it. I thought I could move my things here. Quietly, of course. No one has to know for a while." "Absolutely not," Joel snapped. Avery's face fell. "Joel, be reasonable. We're together now. This is our home. This is her home, he thundered, the words ripping from his throat. This is the home my wife built. You think you can just waltz in and take her place? The color drained from Avery's face. Her place? Is that what I am to you, Joel? A replacement? I thought you loved me. I thought this was what you wanted. What I wanted, he scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. I wanted a divorce, Avery, not a funeral. I wanted to untangle my life, not set it on fire. Her eyes filled with tears, but a hard, calculating glint remained. You may have the money, Joel, but don't you forget that I was the one you came to every night. I was the one who listened. I know all your secrets. You need me. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He looked at her then, truly looked at her, and saw not the carefree artist he'd fallen for, but a woman whose ambition was as sharp and ruthless as his own. The power he'd always held over her was an illusion. In this house of ghosts they were both trapped, circling each other, the unspoken truths between them far more dangerous than the lies they told the world. The call from Detective Harding came a week after the crash. Mr. Davis, we need you to come down to the coroner's office. There are some discrepancies with the identification. Joel's blood ran cold. Discrepancies? He'd assumed the formal identification was a procedural nightmare he could avoid, that dental records recovered from the wreckage would suffice. He drove to the morgue in a daze, the pristine interior of his Tesla a stark contrast to the turmoil in his soul. The coroner's office was a place of sterile, antiseptic dread. Detective Harding met him in a small, windowless waiting room, his expression unreadable. Joel, have a seat. The use of his first name set him on edge. A woman in a white coat, Dr. Evans, entered, holding a manila folder. She had kind eyes that seemed entirely out of place in this environment. Mr. Davis, she began, her voice gentle. I am so sorry for your loss. This is an incredibly difficult situation, and I'm afraid I have some news that may be confusing. Joel braced himself. What is it? We initially made a preliminary identification based on partial dental records found at the scene, which matched those of your wife, John Wilson, Dr. Evans explained, choosing her words with care. However, standard protocol requires a DNA confirmation, especially in cases of fire. We ran the sample against a DNA profile we got from your wife's hairbrush, provided by your housekeeper. She paused, taking a deep breath. Mr. Davis, the DNA is not a match. The person in that car was not your wife. The world tilted on its axis. The air in the room seemed to thin, the fluorescent lights buzzing with an unbearable intensity. What? That's impossible. Her purse, her ID was in the car. We're aware of that, Harding interjected, his voice flat, which raises a lot of questions. Dr. Evans continued, her voice soft but insistent. There's more. The victim was a woman, likely in her late 30s, but she was not pregnant, and the final autopsy report indicates that the cause of death was not the fire or the crash itself. She died from a massive coronary event, a heart attack, likely several hours before the crash. Joel stared at them, his mind refusing to process the information. Not John, not pregnant. Died before the crash. It was a cascade of impossibilities. So who was in the car? We don't know yet, Harding said, his eyes boring into Joel's. But we're running her DNA through the national database. What we do know is that your pregnant wife, John Wilson, is officially a missing person, and the scene of her disappearance is now a potential homicide. Harding's implication was clear. This was no longer a tragic accident. It was a crime scene, and he was the prime suspect. Joel stumbled out of the coroner's office and into the glaring California sun. His carefully constructed world shattered. He drove home on autopilot, the conversation replaying in his mind, each word a shard of glass. He found Avery in the garden, snipping one of Jean's prized roses. She looked up, smiling, a picture of domestic bliss that was now grotesque. "What's wrong?" she asked, her smile faltering at the look on his face. "Joel, you're scaring me." "It wasn't her," he whispered, the words feeling alien on his tongue. "What do you mean?" "The body in the car, it wasn't Jean." Avery dropped the shears, her eyes widening in disbelief. "What are you talking about? That's crazy. It has to be her. The DNA doesn't match," he yelled, the sound raw and desperate. "She wasn't pregnant. She was dead before the crash even happened. The police think she's a missing person, Avery. A missing person, and they think I had something to do with it." A look of pure, unadulterated fear washed over Avery's face. The relief they had both secretly felt was gone, replaced by a terrifying uncertainty. Jean wasn't dead. She was out there, somewhere. The implications were staggering. Had she been kidnapped? Or, a more chilling thought began to form in Joel's mind, had she orchestrated this? The quiet, compliant wife he thought he knew was suddenly a terrifying enigma. She hadn't been a victim in a car crash. She was a ghost who had just set their world on fire and vanished into the smoke. The story exploded. Tech millionaire's pregnant wife vanishes. Mystery body in wreckage. News vans camped outside the gates of the Sausalito estate. Paparazzi followed Joel's every move. His face, grim and haggard, was plastered across every news site and tabloid, the headline always some variation of "The Grieving Husband." His world, once insulated by wealth, was now a public spectacle. The board of his company, Innovate Dynamics, called an emergency meeting. Whispers followed him down the hallways of his own office building. His carefully curated image was crumbling, and with it, his empire. The merger he'd been working on was put on indefinite hold. Joel's grief, a complex and confusing emotion from the start, had now curdled into a potent mix of fear and paranoia. He was no longer mourning a dead wife. He was being haunted by a living one. Every creak of the old house at night made him jump. Every unknown number on his phone sent a jolt of anxiety through him. Was it her? Was she watching him? He hired the best private investigator money could buy, a grizzled ex-SFPD detective named Marcus Thorne. Thorne was a man who operated in shades of grey, with a network of contacts that reached into every dark corner of the city. "She outplayed you, Mr. Davis," Thorne said bluntly during their first meeting in Joel's sanitized office. "Whoever your wife is, she's not the woman you thought you married. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a corporate takeover of her own life." The phrase struck a chord with Joel. He began to see Jean not as the gentle artist he'd betrayed, but as a brilliant strategist, a formidable opponent. He started looking at their life together through this new lens. Her sudden interest in his offshore accounts a few months back, which he'd dismissed as idle curiosity. Her insistence on a post-nuptial agreement last year, citing a desire for personal security, which he'd found oddly charming at the time. He went back to her journal, devouring the pages he'd been too cowardly to read before. The entries were a revelation. They chronicled her discovery of his affair with Avery in cold, meticulous detail. November 5th. He left his credit card statement on the desk. L'Auberge du Soleil. A table for two. I wasn't with him. The charge was from the same night he told me he was working late on the merger. The lies are so lazy. It's insulting. December the 1st. I followed them. He bought her a painting from the gallery he funds. My money. Our money. He touched her arm, and in that one gesture, I saw our entire marriage collapse into dust. The baby is the only real thing left. I will protect this child from his poison. The journal was not a record of heartbreak. It was a battle plan. It detailed her quiet liquidation of assets she was entitled to under their prenup, her research into countries with no extradition treaties with the United States, and her careful cultivation of a new identity. Joel felt a chilling admiration for her audacity. She hadn't just left him. She had executed a flawless escape, framing it as her own death to buy herself time. Meanwhile, Avery was unraveling. The dream of becoming Mrs. Joel Davis, the Queen of San Francisco society, had turned into a waking nightmare. She was now the other woman in a national scandal. Her gallery was failing, her patrons disappearing. "We have to do something," she hissed at Joel one night, her voice frayed with panic. "We need to control the narrative. Go on TV, tell them how much you love her, how desperate you are to find her." "And what do I say when they ask about you, Avery?" Joel shot back, his patience worn thin. "Do I tell them about our romantic getaways while my pregnant wife sat at home alone? Do I tell them you were practically measuring for drapes the day after she died?" The accusation hung between them, ugly and true. The trust, already fragile, was completely gone. They were no longer partners in a secret love affair, but two co-conspirators tied to a sinking ship, each clawing at the other to stay afloat. Joel looked at the panic in her eyes and saw not love or concern, but the terrifying reflection of his own desperation. He was being hunted, not just by the police and the media, but by the ghost of a woman who was smarter, stronger, and more ruthless than he had ever imagined. Joel poured himself a third glass of scotch and opened the journal again. The house was deathly quiet, Avery having retreated to a guest room after their last explosive fight. With Marcus Thorne's words echoing in his head, Joel sought to understand the architect of his ruin. He turned to a section near the end of the journal, the pages filled with Jeanne's precise, elegant script, a stark contrast to the chaos of her plan. January 22nd. The pieces are coming together. It feels like directing a play, and all the actors are unaware of their roles. My biggest challenge was the body, a tragic necessity. I needed a fire, something to obscure identity long enough for me to disappear. I needed a Jane Doe. Joel read on, captivated and horrified. The diary detailed Jeanne's volunteer work over the past year at a city-run hospice. It was a detail he'd barely registered, dismissing it as one of her charitable hobbies. But it was there she had met a morgue attendant named Hector, a kind, lonely man burdened by the anonymity of the unclaimed bodies that passed through his morgue. February 15th. I spoke with Hector today. There's a woman, Eleanor Vance. No family, no friends. She's been in the city morgue for 2 months. Her records show a history of heart disease. She matches my general height and build. Hector is hesitant, but he sees the pain in my eyes. I told him a partial truth, that I was escaping an abusive husband, that I feared for my baby's life. He believes me. People are good, Joel. That's something your cynicism will never let you understand. The level of meticulous planning was staggering. The diary described how she used a burner phone to coordinate with Hector. On the night of the crash, he had signed out Eleanor Vance's body for a late-night transfer to a crematorium, a transfer that would never happen. Jean met him in a desolate parking lot, the body wrapped in a blanket in the back of his van. She'd paid him enough cash to start a new life somewhere far away, a small price for her own. March 5th. Staging the scene was the hardest part. I drove my car, my beautiful, ridiculous cage, to the overlook on Panoramic Highway. I put Eleanor in the driver's seat. It felt profoundly wrong, a violation. I whispered an apology to her, a promise that I would live a life worthy of this second chance. I placed my purse on the passenger seat, my wallet and ID inside. Then I poured the gasoline. The smell will stay with me forever. I used a simple timed igniter, a trick I learned from an old movie. As I walked away into the darkness, I didn't look back. I couldn't. The final entries were written from a hotel room near SFO. They were a mix of resolve, fear, and a deep, aching sadness for the man she had once loved. March 6th. It's done. By the time they find the car, I will be on a flight to Lisbon. I chose Portugal for its beauty, its quiet grace, and its lack of an extradition treaty. I'm not a criminal, but I know Joel. When he realizes what I have done, his pride will be wounded, and he will come for me with all the power his money can buy. He won't come with love, but with rage. He'll want to possess me, to punish me for my audacity. My only regret is this child will never know her father. But the man I married died long ago. He was replaced by a hollow man, a man who values acquisitions over affection. I am not destroying our family, Joel. I am saving what's left of it. Mew and this baby. We are what's left. Joel closed the journal, the leather cool against his clammy hands. The scotch offered no comfort. He felt stripped bare, his entire perception of his marriage, of his wife, incinerated. He had seen her as a beautiful, passive object. His wife, the artist, the mother of his child-to-be. A part of his portfolio of success. He had never once considered the fierce, brilliant and wounded woman underneath. He had underestimated her profoundly, and in doing so, he had not only lost her, but he had also unleashed a force he could never hope to control. The diary wasn't just a collection of secrets. It was a verdict, and it had found him guilty on all counts. The investigation was stalled. The police had identified the body of Eleanor Vance, but her trail was a dead end. The pressure on Joel was immense, but with no evidence linking him to either John's disappearance or Eleanor's death, Detective Harding was left with little more than suspicion. It was Marcus Thorne, the PI, who finally broke the case open, but the culprit he found wasn't the one Joel expected. "I've been digging into Avery Reed," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the polished surface of Joel's desk. "You were so focused on your wife, you never looked at the person sleeping in her house." Inside the folder were financial records and phone logs. They showed a series of cash withdrawals made by Avery in the weeks before the crash, and several calls to a man named Leo Gallo, a low-level thug with a record for assault and intimidation. The final piece was a location ping from Leo Gallo's burner phone. On the night of the crash, it had been on Panoramic Highway, less than a mile from the overlook. "Avery wasn't planning to move into your life, Mr. Davis," Marcus said, his voice grim. "She was planning a hostile takeover." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Joel arranged to meet Avery for dinner at Quint's, a restaurant so public and formal she wouldn't dare make a scene. She arrived looking radiant, a desperate attempt to project an image of stability and unity for the ever-present paparazzi outside. "Isn't this nice?" she said, smiling as the waiter poured their water. "Getting out, feeling normal for a night." Joel waited until their appetizers arrived. "I know about Leo Gallo, Avery." The smile froze on her face. Her fork clattered against her plate. I don't know who that is." "Don't lie to me," Joel said, his voice dangerously low. "My PI is very thorough. He knows about the cash withdrawals. He knows about the phone calls. He knows you paid Gallo to be on that highway the night Jean disappeared." The color drained from her cheeks. She looked around, her eyes wide with panic. "Joel, listen to me. It wasn't what you think." "Then what was it?" he pressed, leaning forward. "An unfortunate coincidence?" Her facade crumbled, replaced by a raw, desperate honesty. I just wanted to scare her. That's all. I hired him to run her off the road, just a little bit. Enough to shake her up." Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "Enough to cause a complication with the pregnancy." Joel felt a profound wave of nausea. This whole time, he had been the villain of the story, the unfaithful husband whose actions drove his wife away. But there was another betrayal, another layer of darkness he had never seen. "You wanted her to lose the baby," he stated, the words tasting like poison. "My child? Our child!" she hissed back, her composure gone. "I was supposed to be the one to give you a child, Joel, an heir. She was in the way. She and her baby were an obstacle to the life you promised me." Her confession laid her ambition bare. She hadn't been in love with him. She had been in love with his life, his name, his power. She saw Jean not as a person, but as a position she was entitled to. In her mind, the baby was a strategic threat to her own ascendancy. "You were preempted, weren't you?" Joel realized aloud, a cold horror dawning on him. Jean's plan, her staged accident, it happened before your thug could even get to her. She saved herself from you. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted. He, the great Joel Davis, the master of the universe, had been a pawn in a vicious game between two women, one fighting for her freedom, the other for a crown. He had been so blinded by his own arrogance and guilt that he had failed to see the viper he'd invited into his bed. He stood up, throwing a few $100 bills on the table. "You are a monster, Avery." He walked away, leaving her alone at the table, the architect of a failed coup. He felt no triumph, no anger, only a profound, soul-crushing emptiness. He was utterly, completely alone, surrounded by the wreckage of a life he had single-handedly destroyed. The next morning, Joel walked into the SFPD headquarters and handed Detective Harding a file containing everything Marcus Thorne had uncovered on Avery Reed. He answered Harding's questions with a detached, clinical precision, laying out the timeline of Avery's withdrawals, her calls to Leo Gallo, and her confession at the restaurant. Avery's arrest was a media spectacle. She was photographed being led from her gallery in handcuffs, her face a mask of shocked indignation. The narrative shifted instantly. Joel Davis was no longer the prime suspect, but another victim of a conniving mistress. Sympathy, a foreign concept to him for months, began to trickle back his way. But Joel found no relief, no satisfaction in Avery's downfall. It was just another body in the wreckage he had created. He retreated to the mansion, now a monument to his failures. The silence was no longer just quiet. It was accusatory. Every room held a memory of Jean, every object a testament to a happiness he had carelessly discarded. He hit rock bottom. The days blurred into a haze of expensive scotch and sleepless nights. He stopped going to the office, ignoring the frantic calls from his board. He was adrift in a sea of regret, haunted by the final words of Jeanne's diary. "The man I married died long ago." It was Marcus Thorne who pulled him from the brink. The PI let himself into the house one afternoon to find Joel unshaven, drunk, and staring blankly at a television screen, flashing images of Avery's arraignment. "This is a pathetic look for you, Davis," Marcus said, his voice devoid of pity. He switched off the TV. "Your wife beat you. Your mistress played you. The world thinks you're either a killer or a fool. You can either drown in this expensive mausoleum, or you can decide what kind of man you're going to be from now on." The words were brutal, but they were true. For the first time in months, something pierced through the fog of Joel's self-pity. He looked around the room, at the life he had built and the life he had shattered. He was the common denominator in all of it. His ambition, his infidelity, his monumental ego. The next day, he started to clean up his own mess. He called his lawyers, not to fight, but to surrender. He convened a press conference. Standing before a wall of cameras, looking tired but sober, he did the one thing no one expected. He took responsibility. My wife, Jean Wilson, is a brilliant and courageous woman, he began, his voice steady. Her disappearance was not the result of foul play, but an act of self-preservation. She left because I betrayed her trust, our marriage, and the family we were supposed to build. My infidelity created a toxic environment, not just for her, but for others, like Avery Reed, who was driven by a desperation that I helped to create. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for pity. He laid his failings bare for the world to see. He announced he was taking an indefinite leave of absence as CEO of Innovate Dynamics to focus on addressing my profound personal failings. In the weeks that followed, he began the quiet, unglamorous work of dismantling his own empire. He sold his shares in the company, his fleet of cars, his vacation homes. He wasn't trying to hide his assets. He was liquidating them, converting his soulless fortune into something tangible, something that could be used for good. He funneled the money, hundreds of millions of dollars, into a single, irrevocable trust. A trust in the name of the only two people who mattered now, Jean Wilson and her unborn child. It wasn't a bid to win her back. It was an act of penance. Marcus Thorne's reach was long. 2 months after Joel's public confession, the PI found her. Lisbon, he said over the phone. She's living in the Alfama district. She has a daughter. Born 6 weeks ago. A daughter. The words hit Joel with the force of a physical blow. A daughter he had never seen, whose birth he had missed, whose life he had already so profoundly damaged. He knew he had no right to see her, no right to disrupt the peaceful new life Jean had built. But he had to try, not for reconciliation, but for a final, necessary closure. He flew to Portugal with no entourage and no agenda. He checked into a modest hotel and walked the cobblestone streets of Lisbon, a city vibrant with a life he felt he didn't deserve. He found her address, a charming apartment with a small balcony overflowing with bougainvillea. He didn't knock. Instead, he wrote a letter, his hand unsteady. He told her he was in Lisbon. He explained the trust fund he had set up, emphasizing that it came with no strings attached, no expectations. It was simply what she and their daughter were owed. I would give anything to see my daughter, even just once, he wrote. But I will understand completely if you say no. Your peace is more important than my closure. Whatever you decide, I wish you a lifetime of the happiness I took from you. He left the letter with the concierge and waited. For 2 days, he heard nothing. He was preparing to fly home, his quiet request denied, when a text message lit up his phone. It was from an unknown number. Praça da Alegria, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Don't be late. The next morning, he found her sitting on a bench in the small, sun-dappled park. She looked different, stronger, more serene. The haunted look in her eyes was gone, replaced by a calm resolve. In a stroller beside her, sleeping peacefully, was a tiny, perfect baby with a wisp of dark hair. Joel approached slowly, his heart pounding. "Jean." "Joel," she said, her voice even. There was no anger, no bitterness, only a quiet finality. He couldn't take his eyes off the baby. "She's beautiful." "Her name is Hope," Jean said softly. The name was a punch to the gut. He finally met John's gaze, and for the first time, he let her see the full depth of his remorse. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words inadequate but utterly sincere. "For everything. For the lies, for Avery, for breaking what we had. I am so sorry." He handed her a folder containing the documents for the trust. "This is for you, for Hope, so you'll never have to worry about anything. So you can be free." Jean looked at the papers, then back at him. She saw not the arrogant tycoon she had fled, but a broken man trying to piece himself back together. It wasn't the past he was trying to buy back, but a sliver of a decent future. She didn't offer forgiveness. It wasn't hers to give, and he no longer expected it. But she offered something else. "Thank you, Joel," she said, and a flicker of the warmth he remembered returned to her eyes. "This is a good thing you've done." They sat in silence for a few more moments, two strangers bound by a shared history and a child. Then she stood up. "We have to go." He nodded, knowing this was it. As she turned to leave, Hope stirred, her tiny eyes fluttering open. For one breathtaking moment, her gaze met his. It was a fleeting, innocent connection that would have to sustain him for a lifetime. Jean pushed the stroller away, disappearing into the vibrant life of the city. Joel watched until she was gone, a profound sense of loss mingling with a quiet, unfamiliar feeling. It wasn't happiness. It was peace. He had faced his reckoning, and in letting her go, he had finally, mercifully, unburdened his own soul. 6 months later, Jeanne stands on her sun-drenched balcony in Lisbon, laughing as Hope takes her first wobbly steps toward her. She is surrounded by the bright colors of a new life, her past a distant memory, her future her own to write. She is resilient. She is dignified. She is free. Thousands of miles away, in San Francisco, Joel tutors underprivileged teens at a non-profit community center. His life is smaller, quieter, but more meaningful than it has ever been. Once a month, an anonymous email arrives containing a single photo of a smiling, growing girl named Hope. It is a quiet act of grace, a reminder not of what he lost, but of the one good thing that came from the wreckage. He has not found a second chance at love, but something far more valuable, a second chance at being a man of character. A quiet, hard-won redemption. This story is a testament to the strength it takes to start over, and the peace that comes from taking responsibility. If you were moved by Joel and John's journey, please like this video, share it with someone who appreciates a story of resilience, and subscribe for more tales of complex lives and powerful transformations.
What would you do if the most dangerous man in London was your only way out? The rain hammered against the grimy windows of the abandoned warehouse as 23-year-old Emma Clark pressed herself against the cold brick wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow, and her white blouse was torn at the shoulder. "Please," she whispered to no one, her voice breaking. "Please, someone help me." 3 months. That's how long she'd been trapped in Marcus Volkov's trafficking ring, forced to work in his underground casino, watched every second of every day. Tonight was supposed to be her escape, her only chance. But they'd found her. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor behind her. Marcus's men were close. Too close. Emma's legs trembled as she stumbled forward, pushing through a door that led to the main hall of what appeared to be an exclusive private club. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over marble floors. Men in expensive suits stood in clusters, drinks in hand, unaware of the horror that existed just beyond those walls. She didn't belong here. Her torn clothes, her bleeding face, her bare feet, she was a ghost crashing a party for gods. "There she is!" A rough voice shouted behind her. Emma ran, her feet slapping against the cold marble. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, but no one moved to help. No one ever did. She collapsed in the center of the hall, her knees giving out from exhaustion and fear. Tears streamed down her face as she looked up at the sea of indifferent faces. "Please," she sobbed. "Please, someone. Bring her to my room." The voice cut through the hall like a blade, deep, commanding, absolutely certain. The kind of voice that didn't ask. It demanded. Emma's tear-blurred vision focused on a man descending the grand staircase. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. He wore a black three-piece suit that probably cost more than she'd made in her entire life. His grey eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. But it was the way every single person in that hall stepped back, the way even Marcus's men froze in the doorway, that told her who this man really was. Dante Moetti, the king of London's underworld. Mr. Moetti, one of Marcus's men stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating. "This doesn't concern you. The girl belongs to Volkov. We're just collecting what's his." Dante reached Emma and crouched down, his expensive shoes just inches from her trembling form. Up close, she could see the faint scars on his knuckles, the dangerous glint in his eyes. He pulled a silk handkerchief from his pocket and gently wiped the blood from her face. "Does she look like she wants to go with you?" His voice was quiet now, but somehow even more terrifying. "Boss, Volkov won't like." "Do I look like I care what Volkov likes?" Dante's eyes never left Emma's face as he spoke. "Tell your boss that if he wants to discuss property rights, he can come to me directly. But I promise you, he won't like how that conversation ends." The men hesitated for only a moment before retreating. They knew better than to challenge Dante Moetti in his own territory. Dante slipped his jacket off and draped it around Emma's shoulders. The silk lining was still warm from his body heat, and it smelled like expensive cologne and danger. "Can you walk?" he asked, his voice softer now. Emma shook her head, fresh tears spilling over. I can't go back there. Please, I'll do anything, just don't let them take me back." Something flickered in Dante's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or memory. Without another word, he scooped her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. Emma instinctively clutched at his shirt, her face pressed against his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "No one," he said, carrying her toward the staircase, "will ever touch you again." Emma woke up in a bed so soft it felt like floating on clouds. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the nightmare of the past 3 months. Then it all came rushing back. She sat up quickly, wincing at the pain in her ribs. She was in a massive bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking London's skyline. Dawn was breaking, painting the city in shades of pink and gold. She was wearing clean clothes, an oversized t-shirt that definitely wasn't hers, and someone had bandaged her wounds. The door opened, and Dante entered carrying a tray. In daylight, he was somehow even more intimidating. And devastatingly handsome. "You're awake," he said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "Tea, toast, fruit. Dr. Romano checked you over while you slept. Bruised ribs, minor cuts, dehydration. You'll heal." "Thank you," Emma whispered, her voice hoarse. "For last night. For saving me." Dante pulled up a chair and sat down, his grey eyes studying her intently. "Tell me your name." "Emma. Emma Clark." "Well, Emma Clark, you've created quite a problem." He leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Marcus Volkov doesn't take kindly to losing his assets. He'll come for you." Fear clutched at Emma's heart. "Then I'll leave. I'll disappear. You won't survive a day on your own," Dante interrupted. "Volkov has contacts everywhere. The moment you step outside, you're dead." Tears burned Emma's eyes again. "So what am I supposed to do? Just wait here until he finds me?" "No." Dante stood and walked to the window, his hands in his pockets. "You're going to stay here. Under my protection." "Why?" The question burst out of Emma before she could stop it. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Dante was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "I had a sister once. Isabella. She was taken by traffickers when she was 19. By the time I found her. He stopped, his jaw clenching. I was too late. Emma's breath caught. I'm so sorry. I don't want your pity, Dante said sharply, turning to face her. I'm telling you this so you understand. Volkov's operation, it ends now. But to do that, I need information. You worked in his casino. You've seen things, heard things. You're going to help me bring him down. And if I do? Emma asked carefully. What happens to me after? You'll be free. New identity, new life, wherever you want to go. You have my word. It was a bargain with the devil, Emma knew. But what choice did she have? Okay, she whispered. I'll help you. Dante nodded once, all business now. Good. Rest today. Tomorrow, we start planning. And Emma? He paused at the door. While you're here, you're under my protection. That means you're safe. But it also means you follow my rules. You don't leave this penthouse without my permission. You don't contact anyone from your old life. Understood? Understood. As the door closed behind him, Emma sank back against the pillows. She'd escaped one prison only to find herself in another. But somehow, this cage felt different. This one felt like it might have a key. 2 weeks passed in a strange sort of limbo. Emma spent her days providing Dante with every detail she could remember about Volkov's operation, guard rotations, secret entrances, the names of dirty cops on his payroll. At night, she lay awake in the guest bedroom, listening to the sounds of the city and wondering if she'd ever truly be free. Dante was complicated, cold and ruthless in his business dealings, yet he always made sure she had everything she needed. He never touched her without permission, never raised his voice. But Emma could feel the intensity radiating from him whenever they were in the same room. You're staring again, Emma said one evening as they reviewed casino blueprints spread across his desk. Dante didn't even have the grace to look embarrassed. You remind me of her sometimes. Isabella. The way you bite your lip when you're thinking. The way you're stronger than you believe. Emma's heart twisted. I'm not her, Dante. I know. His grey eyes met hers, and the raw emotion there stole her breath. That's the problem. Before Emma could respond, his phone rang. She watched as his expression hardened into the ruthless mafia boss everyone feared. When? He barked into the phone. A pause. I'll handle it. Increase security around the penthouse. Now. He ended the call and looked at Emma, his jaw tight. Volkov knows you're here. He's threatening war if I don't return you. Terror clawed at Emma's throat. What are you going to do? Finish this. Dante stood, already reaching for his jacket. Tonight. We have everything we need. My men will raid his casino, his warehouses, everything. By morning, Volkov's empire will be ashes. Let me come with you, Emma said suddenly. Absolutely not. Dante, please. I need to see it end. I need to face him. It's too dangerous. I've been in danger every day for 3 months. Emma stood, her hands clenched into fists. I'm not some helpless victim anymore. I'm a survivor. Let me help end this. Dante stared at her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. You are remarkable, Emma Clark. He walked to his safe and pulled out a bulletproof vest. You stay by my side every second. And if I tell you to run, you run. Deal? Deal. The casino was chaos. Dante's men moved with military precision, clearing rooms, securing evidence, freeing the terrified girls who'd been trapped just like Emma. Gunfire echoed in the distance, but Dante kept Emma close, his hand always on her back, guiding her through the nightmare. They found Volkov in his office, frantically trying to destroy documents. When he saw Emma, his face twisted with rage. You little bitch, he snarled. You think Moetti can protect you forever? You're nothing. Nothing. She's everything you'll never be, Dante said coldly, stepping forward. She's brave. She survived. And she's the reason your pathetic empire is burning. Emma watched as Dante's men dragged Volkov away. She thought she'd feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, she just felt tired. And hollow. "It's over," Dante said quietly, pulling her against his chest. "It's finally over." Emma buried her face in his shirt and let herself cry, not tears of fear this time, but of relief. Of release. "Come on," Dante murmured against her hair. "Let's go home." Home. When had his penthouse become home? Back at the penthouse, Emma stood by the windows, watching the sun rise over London. In a few days, she'd have her new identity. Her new life. She could go anywhere, be anyone. So why did the thought of leaving make her heart ache? "Can't sleep." Dante's voice came from behind her. Emma turned to find him in just his dress pants and an unbuttoned shirt, looking impossibly handsome and utterly exhausted. "Too much adrenaline, I think." He walked over, standing close enough that she could feel his warmth. "I spoke to my contact at Scotland Yard. Volkov will be in prison for the rest of his life. The girls are being taken care of. You're free, Emma. Truly free." "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." "Your new documents will be ready in 3 days," Dante continued, his voice carefully neutral. "I've set up accounts for you. Enough money to start over wherever you choose." "Wherever I choose," Emma repeated softly. She looked up at him, at this complicated, dangerous, wonderful man who'd saved her life in more ways than one. "What if I don't want to leave?" Dante's breath caught. "Emma!" "I know what you're going to say," she interrupted. "That you're dangerous. That I deserve a normal life. That I should run as far from this world as possible." She took a deep breath. "But here's the thing, Dante. I've spent the last 2 weeks watching you. The real you. Yes, you're ruthless with your enemies. But you're also kind to your staff. You donate millions to help trafficking victims. You saved me when you didn't have to." "You don't know what you're saying," Dante said roughly, but he didn't move away. "I've done terrible things, Emma. I have blood on my hands. And I have scars on my soul," Emma countered. "We're both broken, Dante. But maybe we could be broken together." "If you stay," Dante said, his voice raw with emotion, "there's no going back. My world, it's dangerous. There will always be enemies, always be threats. I can protect you, but I can't promise you a normal life." Emma reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I don't want normal. I want real. I want you." Dante's control shattered. He pulled her against him and kissed her with desperate intensity, as if he'd been holding back for weeks and finally couldn't anymore. Emma kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring all her fear and hope and unexpected love into that single moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Emma Clark," he whispered. "God help me, I tried not to. But you're brave and strong and you make me want to be a better man." "Then be better with me," Emma said softly. "Be yourself with me. That's all I ask." "Stay," Dante said, and it was both a question and a plea. "Stay with me. Not because you need protection, but because you want to. Because you choose to." "I choose you," Emma said without hesitation. "I choose this. I choose us." Dante kissed her again, softer this time, filled with promise and hope and the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find. Love in the most unlikely place. 1 year later. The garden was full of white roses and twinkling lights. Small, intimate, just 50 guests who mattered most. Emma stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her simple lace wedding dress, and couldn't quite believe this was her life now. "You look beautiful," Dante's mother said, dabbing at her eyes. In the past year, Emma had gained not just a fiancé, but a family. People who loved her, protected her, accepted her. "Thank you, Mama Lucia," Emma said, using the nickname that always made the older woman beam. She'd spent the past year helping Dante expand his legitimate businesses while quietly dismantling the darker parts of his empire. It turned out she had a gift for strategy and negotiation. She'd also started a foundation for trafficking survivors, using her experience to help others find their way back to themselves. The music started, and Emma walked down the aisle to where Dante waited, looking devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo. When their eyes met, he smiled, that real smile he saved just for her. "Hi," she whispered when she reached him. "Hi," he whispered back, taking her hands. "You're sure about this? Last chance to run." "I'm not running anymore," Emma said firmly. "I'm right where I belong." The ceremony was short and sweet. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Dante kissed her with such tenderness that Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I love you, Mrs. Moetti," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too," Emma said. "My dangerous savior. My impossible love. My home." As they walked back down the aisle hand in hand, Emma thought about that terrified girl who'd collapsed in a hall, begging for help. She'd been saved that night, not just by Dante, but by her own courage to accept his help. To choose to stay. To choose love over fear. Sometimes the most dangerous choice was the right one. And sometimes, the devil in a three-piece suit turned out to be your guardian angel. What would you do if the most dangerous man in London was your only way out? Emma found her answer in the one place she never expected. In his arms, in his home, in his heart. Because sometimes love finds you in the darkest places, and sometimes the man everyone fears is the one who will fight the world to keep you safe.